I'm going to read through my thesis defense. This is the newest copy. We're trying to hit 12 minutes. Have not happened yet. Okay. Hello, and welcome to my defense. I'm Jessie Lentz, and I'm a found object artist. I wanted to thank you all for joining me in finishing out my program here at MCAT. It has been amazing having all of your support and guidance over the last few months. During this presentation, I will be moving around the piece and encourage you to explore the rooms and spaces as well. I've always liked stuff. Even before I was an artist, I always collected things, seemingly without rhyme or reason, but rather just what I was drawn to in that moment. I like toys and small things, Barbie accessories, and quarter machine prizes. The main focus of my practice is collection and how hoarding behavior can be an artistic medium. The act of collection, hoarding, transformation, and repurposing is shown in my compulsion to collect and preserve the ephemera of everyday life. By using objects, I am recontextualizing what art can be and how we view it. Collections and found objects are an important part of the practice I have developed. In my final piece, Homestead, I have used objects I have collected, things that were given to me, things I've had since I was a child, stuff I found online, and a whole lot of boxes to create the capstone project for my MFA program. I found inspiration in the historical and the contemporary, both in the fine art world and outside of it. From curiosity cabinets and the Victorian naturalistic collection to Pinterest and other more modern rainy day projects. Contemporarily, there are a few artists I have found inspiration from in the creation of this work. In Homestead, I attempted to find the intersecting aesthetical values of Janet Cardiff, the repurposing and darkness of Mike Kelly, the beauty and form of Felix Gonzalez-Torres, and the grandness of scale and concepts behind Cornelia Parker's installations. Much like Parker, I am very interested in how mainstays of the domestic can transform and relate to the viewer, how a home and what is inside of it can become the catalyst for a greater discussion, how Gonzalez-Torres can tell a story with an object and a gesture, allowing narratives and portraits to form from stuff. And much like Cardiff, I am interested in how fabricated environments, much like this installation before you, and the choice of the objects used, can create dreamlike spaces. Furthermore, like Kelly's early soft work, I am interested in childlike motifs and explorations, how play and toys can be utilized to connect to many different types of people. I have drawn inspiration from these artists, as well as my continued love of the miniature and the diorama, specifically focusing on the dollhouse because of a specific memory from my childhood. When I was a little girl, I would often go to the city to visit my grandmother. I would spend time in the basement for most of these visits. There wasn't much to do down there, but up on a high table there was a huge and beautiful dollhouse, with shag carpets and working lights, tiny framed pictures of my family, secret rooms, and special places. But I was not allowed to play with this house, only view it from the boxes I could drag over. This was a special object, and I wanted it more than anything. For my capstone project, I wanted to create a piece that calls back to that memory of this miniature grand building, full of rooms I couldn't experience and things I couldn't touch. It was important that in this piece, the viewer had to stretch or bend to see every space, to become that child looking in and wondering who was inside, and who cared enough for these objects to keep them. The physical structure of Homestead was inspired by the Ponte City apartments in Johannesburg, South Africa, and the biblical Tower of Babel. Ponte City is a large tube with windows on both sides of the apartments it holds, while the Tower of Babel, which can be read as a story about hubris and a breakdown of communication, is often depicted as more conical. I have taken the cone shape and the hollow interior and used those in the building of my piece. These structures inspired me both as dwelling, collection, shape, and story. It was important that Homestead emulated a multi-family living situation, that this wasn't just one big house, but rather many small spaces, occupied by many different types of people. Much like Ponte City, with its lack of upkeep and crime problems, this place seems a bit chaotic and messy from far away. But in each space, there is safety and quiet, somewhere to reflect and explore. The tower I've created, of dioramas, boxes, storage, and lights contain many small moments. This has been a logical way to bring together both my love of the found object, the kinetic, and the domestic. The mouse, whose name is Vincent, along with along with the along with the changing, timed lights, are the main kinetic element. They are fun surprises that I would enjoy in someone else's work, so I have included them in my own. Though the mouse gives some scale to who might occupy the spaces, I have chosen to leave out any human figures, instead using the empty chairs and spilled cups to represent figures that have gone, if only for a moment. While I have joked that this is a very similar piece to my undergraduate thesis work, the only real connection is the diorama and lack of people. In that work, I was hand-making every piece, as opposed to using found objects and prefabricated items as I have here. Those spaces were also based off of early modern art paintings, while these rooms I have curated mostly by intuition, spending time with each space and designing them to the aesthetics of who might live inside of it. Taking the ideas of collection, hoarding and ephemera, my work has been on a trajectory of discovering an authentic way of communication for my art, as both an answer to a question and a language of its own. In Homestead, I have continued the dialogue of collection and preservation I have been working towards. Here, I have brought together many different types of objects to create a structure that is full of small, possible narratives and encounters for the viewer. I have chosen to create my installation on this stage as a reference to an attic above a home, both with the lighting, the use of space, the hardwood floors, and the way I have forced the viewer to enter the space through the slightly open curtain. I am emulating a moment of discovery and wonder, a little bit of playfulness, and a bit of theatrics to make this a multi-sensory experience for those who would come across it. The use of the newspaper and cardboard boxes harken to the simplistic uses of these temporary, humble materials and how they can be used to protect and keep our precious memories. The smaller piles throughout the stage, as well as the interior pile, emulate the spaces and other structures around this building. Much like the Ponte City apartments, the interior of this building is filled with objects, in this case sheets, toys, and objects left behind. And much like Ponte City, it is the largest building in the created environment, a huge monument to come upon. While I have chosen to mainly focus on interiors, there are a few outdoor scenes towards the bottom of the piece. Originally, these were meant to be small breaks, small moments of nature, and while I enjoy these small moments, currently I am more interested in the indoor and use nature only briefly in this piece. Interiors have been a clearer way to explore the domestic concepts I am focusing on. The lights throughout the piece come on and off at seemingly random but spread out intervals. Because of the longer lengths of time, different people will experience different scenes. I hope that the changing of the lights, as well as the mouse living in these specific dioramas, will compel the viewer to spend more time with the piece. Those who spend the time are rewarded with small moments of humor and special things to see. In the display, I have chosen to have the viewer looking into a space as if they were standing in the doorway of each room or moment. They are in the center of each space, but rather off to the side, the hallway, or another room. Rather than entering the piece, they are on the periphery of another space, the attic that the stage has become. In this work, while I am using playful and childlike aesthetics and objects, I am towing a line with loss and how objects hold memories for us. I have held the belief that objects are imbued with their own stories and narratives, that because of our connections with them and where we were when we encountered them, they can represent moments of joy or sorrow. Things like a teddy bear, an old phone, or a piece of cultural memorabilia from the decade of your childhood. Found, bought, or given, the objects I have chosen to work with are given context by the time periods that they were created in, and thus given history by those who recognize those moments. One of my favorite parts of creating this piece was when people would come into my studio and we would sit on the floor and look at the rooms together. I love telling the stories and explaining where the objects in the rooms come from. There are a lot of exciting moments in this piece, but there are a few I want to point out as being special to me. This piece, which is a reference to Zach Galifianakis' talk show Between Two Ferns, using the format of two chairs interviewing each other, there is a conversation that has recently ended, with the cups left behind. Or this piece, with a family that is moving out, small cardboard boxes destined for another place, packed up and leaving this very tacky carpet behind. And this one where they're just moving in, just beginning to be unpacked and make new memories, a fresh start in a new place. These 2 rooms, with one with a shut-in, gun on his chair, and below that a child's bedroom, with a hatchet against the wall. Over here is an attic seam, stored away objects and things they might need someday, a running bath, a pair of binoculars, a party that has just ended, a bedroom for an athlete, skates and point shoes ready, a spilled cup of tea, a bad day, and a stained carpet. There are a few larger rooms, with furniture and objects to match, and some very small spaces, each holding an idea that there is importance in the things we choose to keep around ourselves. As this piece is removed from the gallery, the dioramas will be boxed up and sent off to different people and places, continuing their lives separately from the group. While this may seem discordant with my hoarding behavior and ideas about collection, I am actually very comfortable with the idea of disbursement. In allowing my work to leave my collection, it continues to accomplish what I wanted by still existing away from the larger piece. I am inviting people to request a box for themselves, thus allowing the collection to expand outwards instead of inwards. I have always been okay with sorting my collections and giving them away, knowing that they will have good lives without me. When I started graduate school, I wanted to make many little things come together into a larger thing, miniature to grand scale. In the 2 years I have worked here, I feel that this piece has achieved that. While I have tried many different ways to tell my stories, the diorama has continued to come back as the most authentic way of working for me. I will continue to work with the miniature, the collection, and the diorama in new ways moving forward, using jewelry making, the internet, and singular spaces, like the 3D Shop Locker Gallery, to create new spaces to show off the stuff that I love. Again, I want to thank you all for your help along this very scary journey. Your advice and availability has been the backdrop to my being able to accomplish this work and encourage me to move forward. Thank you. Lucky I moved it after 12.